welcome to G Fun Facts Online. In the history of science, some revolutions are loud and explosive. Others are quiet, patient, and unfold over decades in a remote forest. This is the story of one such revolution, a profound shift in how we see ourselves and the world around us, known as the Goodall effect. It's the story of Dame Jane Goodall, the woman who single-handedly dismantled the wall between humans and animals. Her passing in 2025 at the age of 91 marked the end of an incredible life, but her legacy is a permanent part of our scientific and cultural DNA. To understand the earthquake she caused, we first have to visit the world she entered. In 1960, the study of animal behavior was rigid and detached. Animals were seen as biological machines, complex automata that simply responded to stimuli. Their inner lives, thoughts, feelings, personalities, were considered off-limits for serious science, a philosophical hangover from René Descartes, who saw animals as mere machines. The prevailing scientific sin was anthropomorphism, attributing human-like qualities to non-humans. Researchers in labs assigned numbers, not names, to their subjects to maintain objectivity. And the line between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom was thought to be sharp and absolute, defined by one key skill: the ability to make and use tools. Field research was rare and brief. No one really knew what chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, were like in their natural habitat. This was the sterile, detached world that a young woman with no university degree but boundless patience was about to turn upside down. Valerie Jane Morris Goodall was born with an obsession for animals. As a 4-year-old, she once hid in a henhouse for hours just to see how an egg was laid, sparking a frantic police search by her worried mother. She dreamed of going to Africa to live with and write about animals, a dream that seemed impossible for a girl with no money for university. So she trained as a secretary. But in 1957, an invitation from a friend to visit their farm in Kenya changed everything. She worked as a waitress to save up for the boat fare. Once there, she boldly called the famous paleoanthropologist, Dr. Louis Leakey. Leakey was searching for human origins in the fossils of Olduvai Gorge, and he believed that studying the great apes was key to understanding our own ancestors' behavior. He was looking for someone with an open, unbiased mind, unburdened by academic dogma. He found it in this 26-year-old secretary with a deep knowledge of African wildlife. Leakey secured funding, but British authorities were hesitant to let a young woman go into the wilds of Tanganyika alone. So, in July 1960, Jane arrived on the shores of the Gombe Stream Chimpanzee Reserve, accompanied by her mother, Van. Armed with binoculars, a notebook, and an insatiable curiosity, her journey began. The first few months were discouraging. The chimps were terrified of her, fleeing whenever she came within 500 yards. But Jane was patient. Day after day, she returned to the same high peak, observing from a distance, becoming a non-threatening, predictable part of the landscape. This was the first pillar of her new method, immersion. Her breakthrough came with a calm, silver-chinned male she named David Greybeard. He was the first to let her get close. And this led to the second and most radical pillar of her method: individualization. She gave her chimpanzees names: Goliath, Flo, Fifi, Frodo. To the scientific establishment, this was heresy, pure sentimentality. Her Cambridge professors would later scold her for speaking of chimpanzee personalities, minds, and emotions. But to Jane, it was just common sense. She argued that you couldn't live alongside any animal and not see their unique character. Naming them was essential to tracking their lives, their relationships, and their social strategies. She saw them not as specimens, but as a society of individuals. She documented their hugs, kisses, and pats on the back, recognizing them as signs of deep, affectionate bonds. What her critics called a loss of objectivity, Jane saw as the only way to gain a true, nuanced understanding. It wasn't anthropomorphism, it was empathetic observation. She also, controversially, set up a feeding station, using bananas to attract the chimps to her camp for better observation and filming. While this was critical for her early discoveries, and for habituating the chimps, she later acknowledged it wasn't without problems, as it altered their natural foraging patterns and increased aggression. But these methods, combined, yielded discoveries that would rewrite the textbooks. In November 1960, she saw David Graybeard select a twig, strip it of its leaves, and carefully insert it into a termite mound to fish for insects. Before this moment, tool-making was the defining trait of humanity. We were man the toolmaker. When she telegraphed the news to Louis Leakey, his reply became legendary. Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans. A line that had stood for centuries was suddenly blurred. Later, she would see chimps using stones to crack nuts and leaves as sponges to drink water. Next, she shattered the belief that chimps were peaceful vegetarians. She witnessed them eating a baby bush pig, and later documented them carrying out coordinated, strategic hunts of red colobus monkeys. Some chimps acted as drivers, others as blockers, while one went in for the kill. This showed a capacity for planned, collaborative action. But her most profound discoveries came from long-term observation. By following the lives of named individuals, she revealed a society as complex and dramatic as any human one. She chronicled the saga of the matriarch Flo and her children, showing how crucial a mother's teachings are for survival. She saw chimps comforting each other after a loss. She saw what could only be described as joy and sadness, and she even saw the adoption of orphans by unrelated chimps. She also uncovered a complex political world. She watched a male named Mike use cunning, banging, noisy kerosene cans together to intimidate rivals and seize the alpha position. Other leaders used alliances and social grooming to maintain power. It was a world of distinct personalities and political strategies. For the first decade, she believed chimpanzees were, on the whole, rather nicer than human beings. That idyllic view was shattered in the 1970s. She witnessed the darker side of their nature. She saw a mother-daughter pair named Passion and Palm systematically kill and eat the infants of other females in their community. Even more shocking was the outbreak of what she called the Gombe Chimpanzee War. From 1974 to 1978, the once unified community split into two. The larger group then began a 4-year campaign of systematic, lethal raids against the smaller one. They ambushed the rival males one by one, beating them to death until the entire breakaway group was annihilated. This discovery of organized, lethal intergroup violence, of war, was deeply disturbing. It suggested that the capacity for xenophobia and brutality was not uniquely human, but rooted deep in our shared ancestry. The Gombe chimps were not simply good or bad. They were as complex and contradictory as we are. The shockwaves from these discoveries radiated far beyond Gombe. Jane Goodall, along with Diane Fossey, who studied gorillas, and Birute Galdikas, who studied orangutans, became known as the Primates. These three women, backed by Louis Leakey, shattered the glass ceiling in field science. Jane, in particular, became a global icon thanks to National Geographic films and photos. The image of the young woman living among wild apes inspired millions, especially young girls. Many female scientists today directly credit seeing Jane on TV as the moment they realized a career in science was possible for them. Primatology now has one of the highest proportions of female scientists, a direct legacy of her courage. Her methods also created a new gold standard for ethology. Patient, long-term, immersive study of individuals became the new ideal, leading to a richer understanding of countless species. She validated the idea that animals have personalities, minds, and emotions, helping to launch the field of cognitive ethology. Philosophically, her impact was seismic. By showing that tool-making, hunting, complex emotions, and even warfare were not exclusive to humans, she dismantled the idea of human exceptionalism. We weren't on a pedestal, we were on a continuum of life. This had powerful ethical implications. If chimps are so like us, how can we justify using them in invasive research or keeping them in barren cages? Her work provided the scientific foundation for a new era of animal rights and welfare. For more than 20 years, Gombe was her world. But a conference in 1986 changed her life's course. As researchers from across Africa shared their findings, she was horrified by the full scale of the threats facing chimpanzees. Massive deforestation, the brutal bushmeat trade, and the horrific conditions in medical research labs. As she put it, "I went into that conference a scientist. I left an activist." At age 52, she left her forest home and began traveling nearly 300 days a year, becoming a global voice for conservation. She became an outspoken critic of animal testing, and her powerful testimony helped lead to the end of invasive research on chimpanzees in the United States. Appointed a UN messenger of peace, she used her platform to fight for the planet. But Jane knew awareness wasn't enough. She needed to build institutions. In 1977, she founded the Jane Goodall Institute. A key evolution in its work came from a simple observation from an airplane window. Flying over Gombe, she saw it was a tiny island of forest, surrounded by bare hills, stripped by impoverished local communities, struggling to survive. It became clear that you couldn't save the chimps without helping the people. This led to TACARE, a program for community-centered conservation. Instead of imposing rules, the Institute listened to villagers and provided resources for sustainable farming, healthcare, education, and microloans for women to start eco-friendly businesses. The philosophy is simple. When people's needs are met, they become partners in protecting the environment. Then, in 1991, while meeting with a group of teenagers in Tanzania who felt hopeless about the state of the world, she co-founded Roots and Shoots. It's a global youth program built on one idea: every individual matters. Every individual has a role to play. Every individual makes a difference. It empowers young people to design and run their own projects, to help people, animals, and the environment. Today, it's a global movement, with thousands of groups in over 60 countries. The Goodall effect began with one woman who dared to see animals as individuals. Her work didn't just add to our knowledge, it forced us to rethink who we are. Through the window she opened into the world of chimpanzees, we saw a reflection of ourselves, our capacity for love and altruism, but also for politics and violence. Her life was a testament to the fact that discovery brings responsibility. She spent her final decades traveling the world with a message of hope, but it wasn't a passive optimism. It was a call to action. Her passing is a profound loss, but her legacy is immortal. It lives on in the ongoing research at Gombe, in the restored forests of the TACARE program, and in the millions of young people empowered by Roots and Shoots. Jane Goodall taught us that science and compassion are two sides of the same coin, that understanding is the first step to caring, and caring is the first step to action. Her life proved that one individual can, in fact, change the world.